You're listening to The Power Project. I'm your host, Brandy Voth, and it's my goal each week to empower you and inspire you to go out and lead purpose-filled lives while owning your God-given power. My guest today is the truest testimony of overcoming obstacles. Teisha Simmons and I have the opportunity to sit down and discuss the power of mindset, the power of adaptation, and what it takes to pivot when life takes unexpected turns. We have a true conversation about depression and anxiety and the need for those that speak into our lives to be a voice that truly honors us and our purpose in life. We also talk about the power of a praying mama during the hard times. I know you are going to be blessed by this conversation just as I was. So without further ado, let's jump right in, shall we? Welcome back to The Power Project, you guys. I am so ready to get into this conversation that we're going to have today. I know that every single week that I bring you a new guest, I am so inspired by their stories, and I can't wait to share their stories with you. This lady that I have on today, I had the privilege of hearing speak just a couple of weeks ago. I was so inspired by her story. I was so moved by her story. I did what I do best, and I immediately reached out via the messenger and said, hey girl, I would love for my audience to hear from you. She has such a story of overcoming obstacles and just being the truest form of a warrior in life. I know that you guys are going to be inspired by her today. She is a mother. She is an entrepreneur and a small business owner. She has a consulting firm in Alaska, and she's a wife. But most importantly, she's a daughter, and she's really proud of that title. Hey, Teisha, how are you?
I'm good. Just sitting by my wood stove here in chilly Alaska.
Oh my goodness. It is like 92 degrees in Texas right now.
Yeah, we're about 60 degrees cooler than you for sure.
Well, you have such a unique story, and I was so blessed to be in the audience and hear your story. And it really, there was definitely struggle and trials, but the triumph and the victory and just God's purpose for your life shined through from that stage so much.
Oh, thank you.
I think that every time that anyone is willing to be obedient and share their stories in hopes of inspiring or motivating someone else, I'm grateful for it. And I think that's the most natural, authentic way to connect with others.
Yes, I agree. And I think it gives others permission to share their stories. So I think the more we do share our stories, the more healing kind of ripples out.
I firmly 100% believe that. And I love that I have seen a shift recently, in the female community, where it seems like for so long we kind of felt like we had to keep things together and bottled up and make it look good. And there is this beautiful shift where women are saying, hey, this is my story, and I hope that you can benefit from it.
Absolutely.
So if you don't mind, Teisha, why don't you set the scene for our audience at home and just go ahead and go there and tell us your story.
Yeah, so I'd be glad to. So let's see. In 1992, I was 15 years old, living a very rowdy, rambunctious life. My mom had me at 40. So by the time I was 15, she was 55, had already raised 4 other kids, and was a little tired. And I think probably like many of the babies of the family, I didn't have as many rules and restrictions. Got away with a lot, and that kind of just became a cycle. And I ended up in a place where I was switching schools maybe every few months because I was getting myself into trouble. I had a very bad reputation in my community. I was kind of the teenager you didn't want your teenagers spending time with. And on August 21st of that year, 1992, I was going to get on a plane to Anchorage, which is Alaska's biggest city, to move to try to start fresh, because at that point I had kind of realized that I had burnt every bridge with anybody. And I had also just finally gotten to a place where I was tired of leading the life I was leading. So I had an aunt and uncle who were thankfully still willing to put up with me. And they knew that my goal was to get my life back on track. But on August 20th, I decided my mom was having a going away dinner for us. And we told my grandparents that we would use their car to go help her cook. Well, we stopped by and said hi to her, but then we left to go listen to the radio and drive around. I was with my two cousins and my older sister. And we're driving down the road. It's all dirt roads, and my village is about 500 people, all dirt roads. You can only fly into it or snow machine in or boat in. So no roads to other connecting cities. So there's probably only about 20 miles of dirt road in the whole community. But we decided to go drive around and have fun like teenagers do. And I'm not exactly sure what happened to this day. It all happened so quickly that, I can't even pinpoint a second where we noticed something wrong. One second we were driving down the road, and the next second we were fishtailing back and forth across the road, back and forth. And then before I knew it, I was opening my eyes, and I was under about 4 feet of water. I didn't even know how deep the water was, but I could still see. I could see the sun is still out in August in Alaska, pretty late, and I could see my surroundings. And the first thing that came to my mind was that I had to get out of that car and get my family out of that car. And so I looked around, I saw the door to my right. And my immediate thought, I can remember thinking this was, reach for that door, flip yourself back right side up, because we were upside down in that car. Flip yourself back over, find these girls and get them out of here. And also thinking at this point, man, we are going to be in a lot of trouble with our grandparents. So I went to reach for the door, and I felt my arm moving, but I could clearly see that my arm just floated in front of me. And right away I was like, oh gosh, I broke my neck, which is very interesting because I didn't realize, I had known I broke my neck somehow, but I didn't realize that paralysis meant like long term. I just knew I couldn't get out of the car at that moment. And so my next thought was, what can I do to let them know where I'm at? Because of course I didn't know how far underwater we were. And so I thought maybe if I blow some bubbles, they'll see that. Maybe they're already out. And so I tried to do that. But of course, that takes breathing in air. So that didn't go well. I ended up breathing in a lot of the lake water and realized just very quickly that, okay, we have a very limited amount of time to get me out of here before I don't have a chance of survival. And so I just accepted at that point. I'd always believed in God ever since I was a little girl. I'd always believed in God. I just knew from the time I was a little girl. And I wasn't a practicing Christian at this age. I knew I believed, but I was very disobedient in all kinds of ways. And so I just accepted at that point that everybody has their time to die. And this was just my time. And at that point, I just decided I might as well breathe because holding my breath was not comfortable. And when I went to start breathing, I didn't feel any pain. Like I always thought, I had a friend who had drowned the summer before in a lake not very far from where we were in that car that night. And it really tormented me for an entire year that he must have really suffered when he drowned. And that it must have been very emotionally and physically just painful. And when I breathed in that water, there was no pain. I had already accepted that this was my time. And I just remember thinking, if I wish I could survive this just to tell his parents that he didn't suffer, because I was so surprised that I didn't feel any pain at all. And right about that time, my sister had gotten out of the car and she reached in and pulled me out of the car, out of the water. She thought that because I wasn't moving, I was just limp. She thought that I had died already. So she was panicking. My other cousins realized that I was still alive. And so they dragged my body up onto the gravel. I was very heavy, of course, soaked in water. So they propped up my legs to get them out of the water because they couldn't get me any higher. And interestingly enough, because I just didn't realize that a spinal cord injury meant long term, I kind of remember thinking at that point, gosh, maybe they'll send me to Fairbanks and I'll get to see the guy I was dating back then. Like, they're going to send me to Fairbanks. I'll be in the hospital for a couple of weeks, get back on with life. And everybody was kind of panicking. And so I was telling everybody, like, calm down. And I was like, I need to try to move my arm. And so I would try to move my arm, but it just kind of flopped like a fish out of water. Thankfully, we were a little bit out of town, and thankfully a couple came by and they stopped and were able to call an ambulance. And The next thing, I don't remember a whole lot. I remember, actually, this is kind of funny. I do remember one point they were going to cut my jeans off of me in the ambulance, and I had stolen them from my sister's room. And I was like, please, please don't cut the jeans off me. Don't cut them. And that really makes me think about how much I didn't realize the severity of my injury. So I get to Fairbanks, and by this point, I began to realize, because my mom has always been such an emotional rock. I mean, she has just always been so supported. She's always been a woman that I could go to, cry to. She would make me feel better about anything. And I remember there was a look in her eyes in that emergency room where I thought, why does she look like that? This must be really, really bad if she cannot respond to me. And so I woke up 5 days later in the ICU. I had a tube going into my neck, a tracheotomy, because I'd breathed in all that dirty lake water. My lungs weren't functioning like they should. And I woke up and my mom broke the news to me that I had broken my C4 vertebrae and that I wasn't going to walk and probably move my arms again, and that they had to put this tube in my neck to keep me breathing. And she said, the doctors told me that they've never seen a mother pray so hard and not leave the side of a bed for so many days. She was like, and God answered my prayers. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, why would you pray for me? Why would you ever pray for your daughter who you love to be able to survive something that will leave her paralyzed from the shoulders down? And I was so upset with her for praying for me. And I just remember thinking, like, please stop praying. And my prayers actually went in the opposite direction. I just remember praying, like, okay, God, please make something go bad here. Let my lungs start failing. Let this go wrong. Like, don't let me survive this. I went into a very, very deep, dark depression. My mom quit her job. My sister dropped out of college. We all went to Seattle. They lived in the Ronald McDonald House for 6 months while I was there for rehab. I was a terrible, terrible rehab patient. I feel bad for my physical therapist and occupational therapist and every therapist you could think of. They all had to put up with my bad attitude. But I was there for 6 months and I just didn't think, I mean, at 8 a.m. when they come in, I would be refusing service. And my mindset at the point was, my life is never going to get any better than this. So why should I get up? If I go to physical therapy, I'm not going to walk out of here because of it. I'm still going to leave in a wheelchair. So why get up and work with a physical therapist? And so I left there pretty set back from where I could have left there, just with skills wise and things. And I also left there on that ventilator still. So I had a tube that was in my neck connected to a machine that sat on the back of my wheelchair, pushed air into my lungs, got back home 6 months later. I thought everything would be fine and life would be great again, just because I'd be back home, and was even more devastated because that was when reality really set in that this is my new life. And I can tell you that the best way to describe my lifestyle at that point was that I knew the TV guide from about 8 a.m. until about 11 p.m. I began overeating. I could literally eat a medium-sized pizza to myself. And I just felt like I'll never be pretty again. I'll never have a good life again. I'll never be able to do all of the things that a young woman dreams of doing. So why try? Why do anything? Why get out of bed? I would literally sometimes only get out of bed that week to shower and then go back to bed. And there were just so many days of just tears and anxiety and insomnia. Probably one of the worst experiences of that whole time was that everybody had to sleep, of course. So my mom was 56 at this point. She was my caregiver. My sister went back to college and was helping here and there. But they had to sleep at night, of course. And I had insomnia that would keep me up for about 3 or 4 days at a time. And then I would sleep for a few hours and be up for another 3 to 4 days at a time. And we had no internet. We were so poor. We were eating out of food boxes. The apartment we were in was not wheelchair accessible. We didn't have a vehicle. I mean, my mom couldn't go back to work because she was caring for me 24 hours a day. And it was just a really difficult time. And I remember being up for those nights when I had insomnia and counting the tiles on the wall because there was nothing else to do. There was no internet. Even if there was, we wouldn't have been able to afford it or a computer. And that was probably some of the darkest times, were counting those tiles, waiting for people to wake up just so I could interact with other people again. Thankfully, though, I have to credit that, many times we wonder, how God speaks to us. In fact, my prayer for about 20 years has been like, God, let me hear your voice, like guide me directly. Let me know clearly what you want me to do and convict me where you need to so that I can fully be aligned with his will for my life. And that wasn't necessarily my prayer back then, but thankfully he knew, because somehow deep inside me, I decided to slowly start doing things again. I had a friend of mine, she came over and said, there's a little school, it's got very few students, and you should try to come for at least half a day. So I did. And when I went back to school, something woke up in me. As bad as I was as a 15-year-old before my injury, I always got straight A's. I love learning. I love academics. I love being productive, studying and doing papers and things. And so I went back for 2 classes, just back to high school to get back in. I was a year behind and I fell in love with it. The only way I can explain it is I became addicted to studying and addicted to learning and doing homework. I remember my mom coming into my room and saying, do you need me for anything? Like, you never call me for anything anymore. You never want me to do anything. And it was because I was just so engrossed in my studies. I had one, it's called a mouth stick that I would turn pages with. So I held it in my mouth and I had this little rubber end and it could stick to the pages to be able to turn. And I was just fully in. And that really woke something back up in me. So from there, I just whizzed through school. I graduated a year late. I just knew I was going to go to college. So I entered a bachelor's program in psychology at our local university. And really, God was just whispering in my ear all along. And it wasn't clear, but I just knew what the right thing to do was. And I still lived a very turbulent bit of a lifestyle, trying to fit in with friends still. But always my sense of who I was as a Christian was there. And I also didn't have a very good sense of who I was as a Christian. I didn't even really understand what faith was. At one point, I think I even Googled, like, who came first, Jesus or God? Because I didn't know. And the internet was a big deal for me because it really opened me up to being able to learn more about my faith. But there were a lot of years where still depression creeped in. I was still very, very angry about my injury. So even though I was thriving in many ways of going to school and I lost a bunch of weight, I lost like 40 pounds, started taking care of myself, moved into my own apartment with a caregiver. And even though I had all of this going on for me, I was still very angry. And one day my friend Charlisa came over to my house. And when I say angry, I mean, if my sister didn't fix my leg the correct way, I would literally cuss at her. I was so angry that I couldn't do things myself. And if they weren't done perfectly, I would just be terrible. And so my friend came over to my house and she said, Teisha, as long as you continue to treat people poorly, I can't be your friend anymore. I'm going to stop coming over here. And I'll tell you what, that hurt. Like, I was angry with her for saying that. But I took that, and every night when I would go to bed, I would say to myself, what are the different ways that I could start to improve the way I'm treating people? Because I knew, I mean, in my mind, I knew I was treating people poorly and I would feel bad, but I justified it because I'm in a wheelchair. I have a spinal cord injury. You can't be mad at me. You have to forgive me. And I spent about a year just doing a lot of self-talk. And when I say a lot, I mean like an hour at night going over my day and thinking, where did I overreact? Where was I rude? Did it really matter that somebody didn't fix my leg the correct way? Did it really matter that, my hair wasn't fixed perfectly or we couldn't get it to fix perfectly? And I'll tell you what, that was probably the best thing somebody has done for me besides my mom prayed for me, that she saved me. She really saved me with that hard conversation, because once I changed my attitude, man, my life literally took off in so many ways. And that's been one of the biggest lessons for me, is to always listen to that feedback, even if it hurts, because usually it's coming from a place of love. So yeah, then I found myself graduating with my bachelor's degree. I went straight into a master's degree. And I just kept working on myself. I mean, change didn't happen overnight. I literally tell people that I went from eating out of a food box and not having a vehicle, or thinking I was ugly, and being completely broke because we were living off of $800 a month for a 2-person family, and to my life today, which is I own a beautiful home. I always tell people I own a beautiful home with a washer and dryer because we did laundromats for so long that when I bought this house, I came in and I saw the washer and dryer and I said, I will never take you for granted. I will appreciate you every day and not forget about you. So I always think of my washer and dryer. It's a big sign of where I've come from.
This episode brought to you and funded by Powerful Beauty. Are you thinking right now that you've heard enough and you are ready to start your own purpose-filled business? Well, then I think you should head over to the-powerproject.com/powerful business. Watch my video, read my story, and then book a discovery call where we can chat about how you too can be running your very own business full of purpose. That's the-powerproject.com/powerful business.
But I'm happily married now for 11 years. I have a super feisty, sweet, very well-behaved 15-year-old daughter. And I work full-time. I worked many jobs in senior administration and executive management for a lot of years outside the home. And because of my skincare business, I've been able to step back from that and work fully from home and just do some contracting projects on health and wellness, which is really where my heart is. And I just have an incredible life. I have a wheelchair accessible van. I just, in a matter of years, but with a lot of work and a lot of grit and a lot of people supporting me, but me also being open to feedback from others, and a lot of prayer from a lot of people, even when I quit praying for myself. I've literally been able to create this life that I'm at a place now where if I could go back and take that accident back, I wouldn't. If I could walk tomorrow and give up what I've experienced in the last 27 years, I wouldn't do it. In a heartbeat, I wouldn't do it.
Oh my goodness. That is huge. And I was just writing a note down here that I was getting ready to ask you about, because I hate to say, and I try to be really careful about the way this is presented.
No,
because
be frank with me. I don't mind it. I don't get offended easily.
Well, no, but I tend to, I deal with a lot of people. speak with a lot of people that have been through hard times. And so I hate to ever say everything happens for a reason, right?
Oh,
because the people that really bad things happen to have a hard time trying to figure out how this is for them.
I know exactly what you're saying. And I also try to stay away from that because if you would have said that to me 27 years ago, I would not have been a place in my personal growth and awareness where I could have said that, taken that and said, oh, you're right. But today, that accident was a blessing in disguise. I guarantee it. It was God's way of just saying, you know what? You are on a bad track. Time to redirect you. And this is how it's going to happen. But I only see that today. I do not see. I did not see beauty from ashes 27 years ago.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest thing to try to get across to someone that is in the fire, because you can't say everything happens for the reason, and you can't say this is all part of God's plan. What would your advice be when we're speaking to someone that is there in the midst of it?
Gosh, my advice, what I have learned has worked best because I look at these things as stages. So, of course, I was in like a really bad stage, a really bad place right after the injury. And then slowly I began to grow, and slowly I began to grow. And I think people give us signs of when they know. I think people who are really good listeners give us signs of, or they know when we're ready. And so when I have someone who, for instance, when someone loses someone, a loved one passes, I don't ever say those things. And I don't say time will heal all wounds or, at least you had this many years, because they're in the mind frame of this is devastating, this hurts, and I want it to be over right now. And just listening and being there with them and letting them cry and acknowledging their hurt is so powerful. And I had a friend, I didn't realize this until my dad passed over 6 years ago. And I was in my kitchen sitting there, and it was just me, my caregiver, and my good friend came into the house. And I was sitting there and I started just crying, just sobbing. Like that wave of grief hit me. And she came over to me. She put one arm around me and kind of squeezed me and put her head against mine, let me cry. I stopped crying. She sat back down. And then we just started talking about other things. And I remember after that experience thinking, that is probably the most powerful support I have received from anyone during this loss of my dad. And I was kind of shocked at to how much that helped me in over the last few days that we were grieving. And so I took that lesson, and that's what I do. I just be with people. I listen to their hurt. I acknowledge it. I don't try to make them feel better. They're not looking for someone to make them feel better or fix it. If it can't be fixed, if it's something that can't be fixed, like I wasn't going to walk again. My dad wasn't going to be back. And when those situations, when you have such a tragedy, people don't want you to try to make them feel better. They just want their hurt acknowledged. But over the years, as I started to grow, people would definitely reach out to me and do simple things like, hey, do you want to go to a movie? Or do you want to go to church? Or like my friend did, do you want to go back to high school? There's a great little high school. And those little things of offerings and not being offended when I said no, and letting me hurt when I needed to hurt, those really helped. But then I got to a stage where I needed someone to push me. And I feel like that's where the real healing, there's healing going on all along, but I guess stepping forward in healing, like crossing that line of sitting in hurt and grief and despair, and then crossing over into, I'm now ready to grow from this. Because I probably would have never said my injury was a blessing in disguise until maybe 10 years ago. Even when I was thriving and having a great time and met my husband and, had graduated from college, there was still a part of me in the middle of that wished I could walk and wished I had this normal life. But it takes a lot of time for people to get there. And so my best advice would be, don't rush it, just be there. Just be a source of comfort for people when they're hurting, and don't say anything to try to make it feel better. Just acknowledge that you realize their loss.
Oh, I think that's so good. I think that just people, like you say, they just want to be acknowledged and loved. And I can sympathize somewhat, just a very minute amount with what you've been through. I had back surgery about 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years this December 12th. And it was planned back surgery. I had scoliosis all my life, and I slept in back braces for years. And so we knew that when our youngest would go to school that I was going to have my back surgery, because then he would at least be gone 8 hours a day so that, I could have some time to rest and heal. So I went into this and thinking that I had all the mindset that I needed to undergo what I was about to undergo. I had always been an overcomer. I had always been I bounced back very quickly from things. And I thought, okay, I've done all the research. I've researched this my whole life. I'm ready. Long story short, I'm fused T2 to L1, 2 rods, 26 screws. And so when I went through this, I had never experienced, you talk about the depression post-surgery and the anxiety and the insomnia.
Yeah.
I had never experienced any type of depression ever. And I could not, just on the minute level that I can understand what you went through, I felt like I wasn't there for my husband. I felt like I wasn't there for my children. I felt like I wasn't there for my family or my friends. And was I ever going to feel better? And I cried every day for 4 months throughout this. And it was interesting because when you talk about your friend, Charlisa, I believe was her name, that came over.
Yes.
So my husband was amazing. He did everything he could, in the 6 months post-surgery to just acknowledge me, be there for me, wash my hair, dry my hair, all the things. But I'll never forget, it was probably 2 to 3 months post-op, and I was really in a really bad place. And I had the insomnia at night, and then during the day I would nap on the couch, and I was still on the medication and I just had no life of existence. And he came in and he said, "You have to get up off the couch." And I looked at him because I'm like, doesn't he know like how much pain I'm in and how terrible I feel? And I just want to sleep. It was probably 2:00 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "It's going to hurt. You are going to cry, but you have to get up off the couch or you're not ever going to get better."
Wise husband. Wise husband.
Yeah, that was the push. That was the push. Like you were saying, God sends someone to push us. And you talk about grit in your presentation, in your story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell people that was really the truest form of when I had to dig in and decide how much grit did I actually have? How much work was I going to actually do to not just submit to that deep, dark hole and pit that I was in. So I understand that. And I think that, I know for a fact that in business as a whole, whether it be our skincare business or life or any type of entrepreneurship, grit is this, in my opinion, the single most important factor to being successful in life. Would you agree with that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And I will tell you that I think we all know. First of all, I just want to say, like, I think that your story exemplifies what we go through on so many different levels, both of our stories, because everybody has a hurt or a loss or a pain or something that they're suffering from at some point in their life. I always tell people, build yourself up now because at some point, life's going to knock the wind out of you. And maybe it doesn't look like a spinal cord injury. Maybe it's a broken ankle, but that broken ankle, that's a big deal for that person. And their hurt can be really bad. So acknowledge that, hurt for that during that process. But at some point, we have this voice in us that says, okay, maybe today is the day to stop using this as an excuse. And hopefully somebody comes along like a Charlisa or your husband and pushes us if we can't push ourselves. But one thing I always try to make people aware of with my story is that people will say, "You're so strong. I just couldn't do what you do." And I tell them, I'm like, trust me, I never thought I could do what I did, because there was one point where I had to write a 96-page master's thesis to graduate with my master's degree. And I had to do that writing 6 words per minute. The accessible technology back then was not voice dictation. It was what's called a head mouse. I'm super thankful for it because it's been around for 20 years and it got me through high school, my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. But I basically wear this little dot on my forehead and there's a keyboard on my screen and I use that dot to move the mouse and to click on the letters. But the fastest I could type was 6 words per minute. And I tell people, I was not the happiest person and the most motivated. I was not sitting there smiling, thinking, what a joy this is to write this 96-page paper at 6 words per minute. And autosave didn't necessarily work well back then. And there were many times I lost what I typed because I would just forget to press that save button. But it took major grit. It took saying no to all kinds of things in life because I had to write 6 words per minute. It took typing that was taking other people 80% less time to do. And I did not want to do it. I tell people, like, trust me, I didn't look like a happy person writing that paper. Instead, I hated it. I didn't want to do it, but I knew that's what I had to do if I wanted to reach that goal. And so I just like people to know grit doesn't mean it feels good. Grit means you are going to suffer through this because you want to get to that goal, which any good goal is worth pushing through. It means, waking up when you don't feel like waking up. It means going places that are scary and uncomfortable for you. It means, and if it's healing that has to happen in the heart and mind, sometimes it means going to places in our past that are really dark, scary places. And after my dad passed, I went and saw a grief counselor because I literally thought I was losing my mind. I was like, okay, I can't get out of bed. I'm not hardly sleeping. I'm sad. I can't stop crying. And I went to him and I told him all of these things. And he said, well, I have good news and I have bad news. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Everything you're feeling is absolutely normal for grief. He said, the bad news is you cannot feel better until you go through this. He said, this is healing and it doesn't feel good. And oftentimes we think healing is going to feel good, but it does not. But it is so worth it in the end. Every painstaking thing I've gone through to get to where I am today has been worth it. And there are still days. The other thing I tell people is it looks all pretty from the outside. Teisha looks like this strong individual in a wheelchair who can do anything and has conquered so many things. But I still have days where I get the wind knocked right out of me. And I find myself in tears. And I'm saying, okay, Zach, if I don't get out of bed for 2 days, you need to have a conversation with me. And so, I don't believe we get to a place where we don't need to lean in with grit and awareness that we're going through something rough. And the beauty of it is everybody has it. I tell people, if I can do what I have done, not being able to use 90% of my body, then you can do absolutely anything and 10 times faster.
Oh my goodness. That is an amazing, like I'm writing it down right now because it's so good. It's such a good reminder of the potential or the possibility of mindset and deciding that you're going to do it. I want to, because this is a podcast for women, I want to just lean in just a little bit more and ask, you talk about knowing God your whole life, but not necessarily really knowing your faith until you decided to dig in deeper with it. And then you also talk about your mother praying next to your bedside so hard and so fervently for you to live. Was she the prayer warrior in your life? Was she the person you credit being the bridge between you and God?
Yeah, one of my best memories is I was in the 5th grade and we had moved to the biggest city in Alaska. And it was a chilly spring day. And she came into the living room and she said, I'm going to go to church. She's never driven. She should not be on the roads driving. And so she'd say, I'm going to go walk to church now. Do you want to come with me? And I just remember being like, yeah, of course I'm coming with. And her and I walked to church that day. And I can remember even looking down because the snow and the ice on the road was at a place where it was kind of melting. So there's some holes in it. And you could see a little bit of water drops. But I just remember feeling so content on that walk with her to church. And I always craved a relationship with God because she always just made sure I knew. I mean, she didn't overly push us into Sunday school or anything, but it was a common subject in our house. And so I just knew in my core, there's a God and I believe. And then slowly over the years, my faith increased. And I'll tell you that there were a lot of times where I knew I was doing something wrong and I would have to get myself back in line. And there were a lot of times where I definitely strayed away in my faith. But thank God, God doesn't give up on us because he was pulling me back in. And that's the other thing is that God pulling us back in and whispering for us to align ourselves with him, that doesn't always feel good either. So, sometimes it looks like a C4 spinal cord injury. And then other times it's a voice in the head saying, oh, that's the wrong thing. Or here's what I want you to do. Go do this today. So I'm always paying really good attention. And sometimes it also means feeling really far away from God, but leaning in and knowing he's promised he won't leave me. Just because I feel distant doesn't mean he's left me. Just because I feel like not writing that 96-page paper doesn't mean I shouldn't, right? So faith of a mustard seed has been a big one in my life because, even at this day in my life, there are days where I wake up and I'm like, okay, God, where are you? Show up. Like my faith is a mustard seed today, but I know you said you wouldn't leave me. So keep me going today.
That is beautiful. And I love it. And it's obvious that he has had a huge plan for your life. I love getting to know this story and the honor of getting to chat with you and talk with you as a mother to a daughter. So I'm a boy mom, but I have a big heart. I have a big heart for young girls and mother-daughter relationships. So as a mother to a daughter who is the same age that you were when you had your accident, what is the number one above all thing that you hope that she knows about herself or life or her worth or her value? What is the one thing that you hope that is her most true, constant north?
I just want her to be strong enough mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, physically, to be happy with whatever she knows is going to make her happy. Because there are so many things that society pushes us to be, to feel, how to see ourselves. And so oftentimes I feel like people often try to fit into those boxes. And I just want her, whether she wants to be an artist who lives in a dry cabin or a CEO of a large company or a stay-at-home mom, I want her to be confident enough in herself to follow her heart and not be distracted by expectations of others.
Well, I think that that is beautiful. And I think she is a very lucky girl to have you as her mother. Thank you so much for being on with me today. Thank you for your time. Is there anywhere that we can direct people to find you for any future projects that you may be working on?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. Unfortunately, I think I'm at the 5,000 friend max, so people would have to follow me. I apologize for that, but I'm also learning and growing on Instagram. And so my Instagram, I guess they call it like a handle maybe or a name. I'm not exactly sure. I'm trying to adapt to this whole social media change, but my Instagram name is AK, like short for Alaska. So AK Grown Teisha, like grown in Alaska. So AK Grown Teisha.
Okay. All right. I will put that in the show notes. And I know that anyone that follows along with you will be blessed by your story and your life and your positivity. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
I hope that you enjoyed everything that you heard today. I hope that you were just as inspired by Teisha's story as I was when I heard her speak. I immediately knew that this audience needed to hear the story that Teisha has to tell. And I am so blessed each week when these women honor us with their stories. You guys, can I ask a huge favor? If you have not already written a review and shared this on social media and given us a rating, can I ask that you please go do that right now? Because it's with those reviews and those ratings that we are able to get more guests on this show and also get more visibility so that more people know about this show. As always, I cannot wait to chat with you next week. But until then, go out and live your best purpose-filled lives.